Hey everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now. You caught me. You're like super excited to share. You caught me like adjusting my tie, and then my Zoom is on. It's not on mirror image, so I'm pulling it the wrong way. I'm like, why is it getting worse? But anyway, thanks for like being on the ball. Here I am.
Mm-hmm. How are you? What you been reading this week?
Yeah, been reading a lot, and I've had a parent recommend some books to me, and I've had some great conversations. So I was hoping, if it's okay, to do one of those things we do every once in a while, where I'll share a book, but then I want to learn. And
Sure.
I would assume other principals who sometimes I feel like I'm kind of representing is not the right word, but relating to, having empathy with, like maybe
Sure.
some of the conversation might help them too. So. The book I wanted to share is actually what I've heard people refer to as a decodable reader. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of my journey with decodable readers and reading motivation and things like that. So this one in particular that caught my attention and that was shared by a parent is, see, my screen mirror is just rough this week. I don't know what I'm doing. Here we go. Goodness gracious. My summertime camping trip. And actually, I'll just do a 2-for-1 because it's more about kind of, I'll call it the genre, I guess, if that's the right word. Another one that's one of our kiddos' favorites, The Gold of the Black Rock Hill. And here's why I wanted to share. It's more about the conversation this week for me. So as a principal, I've been really dialed into this concept of reading motivation and creating like literacy-rich environments and experiences for kids where they see a genuine love of reading. From people who are growing their identity as readers, and that we would help them do the same. And what I'm also learning is that alone doesn't help all kids or guarantee that every single kiddo will learn to read. They also need really great instruction, right? And some kids even specialize or more instruction. So kind of the my struggle, or where I'm trying to build my schema, is how do we help kids fall in love with reading with some of the picture books and chapter books that you and I share that like just feel life-changing to me, if those books aren't accessible to kids yet, right? Because I would assume that could be kind of frustrating to a kiddo who hears their principal loving to read, but just like isn't there yet. So the parent that I was engaged and just in kind of learning and conversation has been talking through decodable readers and just how good it can feel for her kiddo. And again, I'm not trying to say one kiddo represents all kiddos, just like I don't represent all principals, but like reading or feeling a chapter book can feel really good. And kind of like similar to what peers are checking out, even if the text is structured a little bit differently. But like this big word count, I'm assuming is pretty motivating to kiddos. 700 or 7,387 words. So my kind of question, Jen, is, and I hate to put you on the spot, I should have maybe given you a heads up about this. I feel like I'm not intentionally trying to wade into the reading wars, in case people are wondering, like, oh my gosh, is he going there? Like, that's not my intent. But I do want to make sure that we're ensuring everyone gets the instruction needed to become an awesome reader, but then also has the chance to fall in love with it through that maybe symbiotic relationship between instruction and the love of reading. So do you have any, you always have like wisdom and thoughts and nuggets you've come across. So I'm just going to listen and see if you have anything to help me make sense of all this learning I'm trying to do. So.
Sure. Well, so for our 3.5 viewers who know that we never plan this show, this is totally unscripted and off of the top of my head. So keep that in mind. But the first thing I noticed about what you said is you made the comment of, I'm not going to wade into the reading wars. And that phrase, reading wars, really struck me because I think really while to me it has sort of a negative connotation, it also really strikes at the heart of how passionate people are about reading and their views about the right way to go about it. People can get very entrenched in sort of like one camp or another about these things. And one thing that I think is important about what you said is that, well, let me back this up and say, I think we have to first think about what our goals are for kids. And I think that ultimately, no matter what you think the best approach to getting there is, that ultimately we want kids to be readers and to have a reading life, because we just know how many positive benefits there are from that. So ultimately, we all have the same goal, right? I think where we sort of run into trouble is when we focus too heavily on one thing as being the sole mechanism for getting there. You know, it's like about balance, right? And so sometimes I think some of the texts you're talking about, like the decodable readers or leveled readers, etc., those are wonderful scaffolds. Those should be used to support readers who need a couple extra rungs on their learning ladder to be able to get to those texts that you and I talk about each week, and that we believe are can be life-changing, et cetera, et cetera. A decodable reader can be life-changing for a kiddo if that's the first book that they were able to complete independently. But like all scaffolds, we shouldn't apply them universally to every single kiddos who don't need them. And we shouldn't limit a kid's reading choices based on whatever label or level, some kind of diagnostic or benchmark aligns with those texts. So all of that information and data should help inform a teacher or a librarian and a principal, help match a kiddo with the right text, but it shouldn't be a uniform label. You can only check out the books with the orange dots because that's what you've tested. Ultimately, those things have the exact opposite effect of what we're hoping for kiddos, is that they learn to become independent, passionate readers. Not every kid's going to love reading in the same way you and I do, just like not every kid, I'm a kid who doesn't love sports, right? Not everybody's going to love those things, but you learn to master certain aspects of those things to be successful, and so some kids, we just want to help them develop mastery so they can be successful, even if that doesn't turn out to be their passion. But we want to make sure every kid has an avenue, an on-ramp to that passion, if that turns out to be a good match for them. So I think of those kinds of texts like you're talking about as, for readers who are just emerging, who are just learning how to decode words, then those are an appropriate instructional text. For kiddos who we'd hope would already have achieved that and moved on, then they're a scaffold. But like all scaffolds are meant to come down. So we want to make sure that kids, that they're used appropriately with kids and don't limit them in any way. At least that's my
Thanks, Jen. No, I really appreciate it. And I've enjoyed, I get to talk to lots of parents, lots of kids, lots of teachers, and it's actually one of the highlights of this work. And anytime a student tells me, or if a parent tells me kind of through their student, like, hey, this is what my kiddo wants to read, you better believe I pay attention to that. And the school will look at like making that investment. That's what we want to do to help. But something else you said struck me, that we wouldn't also assume that every kid, and I've seen this done before, and I've probably done it before as a teacher too, but this is your level, stick in there, that's the good fit book, grab a blue sticker. Like I remember in my master's program reading some research that said kids can read a little bit above their level if it's a high interest area, for example, that they're just somehow their skills, because of the background knowledge, I'm assuming. The research is a little rusty, but there's probably quite a few reasons not to restrict them just to the certain level.
And we should always, in my view, I try to think of these things when I am talking to a reader and I can see that they've selected a text that's going to be pretty challenging for them in terms of the vocabulary or what they're ready for developmentally. Then what I try to think about it as a yes and conversation. So there's a zillion reasons why a fourth grader might want to carry around a 500-page chapter book. Maybe that's something their older sibling has read and they want to be cool like that. Maybe they've seen the movie and they're just really interested in seeing the book. What we don't ever want to do is tell a kiddo that reading choice is not good, because if we're telling them that their choices of a reader are invalid, then we're telling them that they as readers are invalid. We don't want to dishonor their reading choices. But what I can do as somebody who knows literature for young people is take a look at that chapter book and say, wow, I love that book and I can't wait to chat with you about it. You know what? You might also love this one that's about a same topic. Why don't we check out both, making sure that the second one is still connected to their interest, but maybe is a little bit more attainable in terms of the text, right? And the other piece of it that we should always remember is that there's a difference between guided reading and independent reading, right? So guided reading, which is done instructionally to help kids master skills as a reader, those texts require a little bit more of teacher adult support, because we're selecting them based on what we know the kids need instructionally, whereas independent reading, we're developing different skills and habits with kids. We want to help them become independent choosers of text, and that's a little bit different, and our approach shouldn't be as heavy-handed. Our pal Donald Miller says the goal of all education is independence. So we want kids to be able to become readers who can select text independently based on authentic readings that are attainable to them and that will help influence them and nourish them, not just as a reader and a student, but as a human being. And so we have to look at our role in both of those lanes of reading just a little bit different. We have a little bit different role in those lanes.
I'm so glad you highlighted that, because I think circling back to what I said earlier, I feel my learning with instruction has been higher, learning and training, so curriculum instruction. It's more that independent reading where I've been trying to wrestle, and I don't really want to pick a side in the reading war. I'm in learning mode. Right, I agree. Yeah. That's my point I'm kind of getting to. I don't think I have enough information to have a concrete opinion other than to say, can't and shouldn't we have both, accessible, decodable text that kids and parents want to have access to as choices in their independent reading, and other books, or the ability for kids to fall in love with? I wonder if part of the war, the reading war, and I'm so sorry I brought us into this, but here we are.
No, that's okay.
It may be part of the war. Inference here is that some people in the conversation are talking about it from an instructional standpoint. Others are talking about it more from an independent reading standpoint. And if we're speaking two different languages or processes, those aren't always compatible either, I wonder.
Yes, and I agree with everything that you said, and I'm going to add something to it as well, is that I think our educational climate, and of course the culture varies from school to school, but in general, I'm painting with a broad brush right now, is that in general, education values the guided reading and reading that can be assessed more so than independent reading. And teachers rightfully feel a great deal of pressure to ensure that kids can perform related to reading that is related to assessment, that has a measurable assessment. And so using the tools like decodable readers, like leveling systems, helps teachers align the content that they're asking kids to consume with the assessments, the goals out, and the standards in the assessment. What those two, a focus on that, on the curricula and the standards and the measurable outcomes, in my view, takes too much attention off of the reader. But I understand we focus so much on the reading, we forget the reader. And I understand why that happens. I completely have worked in those situations myself, and I understand the urge. But as a leader like yourself and other instructional leaders who might be watching this, we have to help encourage those people who are in the classrooms working with kiddos and feel that pressure for those kiddos to perform on whatever the standardized assessment is, to help them remember that they're teaching readers, not just reading. And so part of that, one of those helping the kids become independent readers actually helps fuel and affect positively the reading outcomes that may have been emphasized a little too heavily.
I can't thank you enough for at least being open to talk to me about this without any notice.
Sure.
I just look at this for me as the start of a conversation, and maybe with other people who might be wrestling with it, or who know more than I know, who just want to check in with me and have a conversation. I really welcome and value that. One of my bottom lines, just to kind of wrap up my kind of book talk share, is for me personally, where I'm at right now with all of this learning is, if a kiddo or a parent really wants a book here at our school to read because they're interested in it for any number of reasons, like I want to work really hard with them to try to make that happen, right? And this reminds me of that, whether it's a favorite author or a favorite style of book or a decodable reader. I mean, if there's something a student wants or a parent wants, like that, I want this to be a spot where we can have that conversation too. So.
Well, I mean, and those are the luckiest kiddos of all, to have so many adults in a building and in their life who are devoted to and really interested in helping them develop those reading lives, both academic and personal. You know, it's like anything in life. I just think sometimes we overemphasize one thing because we maybe feel some pressure to do that. And that has consequences. And so then we shift back to another way. It really is about finding the balance between the two, in my view. It's not one or the other. And having been an English teacher and a librarian, et cetera, my pendulum has swung one way. You know, I mean, we all do that. It's just a matter of learning. And I just feel like if you keep the reader at the center of the conversation, you can't go wrong. If you focus too heavily on the reading and forget the reader, I think sometimes that's when we go astray.
Well said. Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
What do you got? Pleasure.